Okay, so what I wanted to talk about in this presentation was the purpose of poetry. So in the ladder of poetry, we've laid out the different the names for the different stages of development. We've got I'll show you. This is what we actually went over in the first presentation on the ladder of poetry. We've got the sentimentals, who are working to create whim poetry, which is primarily dealing with the material of emotion, or the kind of knowing that comes through emotional knowing. And we've got the scholars, who are working with wrought poetry, and what they're working with is ethics or aesthetics. The senses, working with wild poetry, who work with essence. And the scryers, working to create wisdom poetry with eidos. All of those terms I go into in a lot more depth in the first couple of videos, so I would recommend watching those. And so, just to put it into a neat little table, here is what we've got so far. And what I want to do is I want to add in one more column, which is the purpose of poetry. So we've got the affirmation, which is what the sentimental poets are trying to do. They're basically trying to create, affirm emotional realities. Scholars are trying to create a kind of appreciation, which is born out of a critical kind of detachment of aesthetic pleasure. Even when it's talking about ethical things, political realities, it's still geared towards an appreciation of what, as Geoffrey Hill, who I think epitomizes this stage, calls logopoeia, melopoeia, and something else, which is the play of intellect among the words, and the play of melody among the words. And so it's a critical detachment, but as I spoke about in my second video, the scholars and the sentimentals, even though they are at odds with one another and they are constantly debating with one another about what the purpose of poetry is, whether we should be free verse and experimental, or whether we should be traditional in our thematic and formal focus, they actually share a underlying value system or belief system. They're still within the conventional worldview. So, which is all to say that affirmation is implicit in appreciation. There is still a tacit, implicit affirmation of that conventional worldview. It can be, to some extent, pushed, which Geoffrey Hill definitely does, and maybe he isn't the best example here because he does push it quite a bit, but he doesn't go beyond that into offering a new value or belief system. And that's kind of the demarcation I want to make between the sentimentals and scholars on the one hand, and the senses and the scryers on the other. So the senses, what do? What's their purpose for their wild poetry? I'm going to say it's appropriation, which is a attempt to, and I could speak a lot about this, and I'll try to do so in a concise way. It is trying to create something that can actually be taken into the very structures of the reader's being. It is like spiritual nutrition. It's not just, it is like a kind of connection, but it's not just the kind of connection you might have in a really honest conversation with a friend. It is more like a really deep conversation you might have with someone who has some wisdom for you to grow into. And absorb into the structures of your being. So it's a particular kind of intimacy, working, I think, at a higher level of the previous two purposes. And then you've got anagoge at the top level, which is what the scryers are intending and what they accomplish with their poetry, which is anagoge. If for those who don't know that is the name Plato gave to the movement from the cave up into the sun and back, and then in order to let your eyes adjust, and then going back out into the sun. If you're interested in that, look up Plato's myth on the cave. And I just noticed now that anagoge actually goes quite well with eidos, which is also a Platonic notion. So there's a Platonic through line here for this level. Why anagoge? Because in order to assimilate and appropriate it, because just like the sentimental affirmation is implicit in the appreciation of the scholars, the appropriation of the senses is implicit in the scryers. They are ultimately still aiming at the having their readers appropriate their vision, but it's a matter of degree. It's a much bigger degree. It's more like the scryers are trying to almost shepherd civilization, and they're trying they've created something big enough for civilization itself to spend many hundreds of years assimilating into the structures of its being. And what that looks like for individuals as well as for culture at large is an anagogic kind of relationship where we continue to deepen our relationship with it over time. So, tracking this onto what we spoke about in the second presentation, the sentimentals are primarily concerned with the with affirming the emotional realities. So that's what we said here. So it's basically the emotion, the solar plexus and the mudra. We move to the scholars. It's the solar plexus is kind of left, and we've still got the same value system in the mudra, but it is a kind of critical detachment, a lower concrete mind coming through at the top. That's what appreciation is. Right, so tracked out affirmation, tracked out appreciation. And now we're getting into the senses, which is the heart. So that's what they're aiming for. They're aiming for some wisdom, something that's been understood from the inside out, to be assimilated into the reader's being and lives, such that a net positive transformative effect is achieved. And likewise, again, the scryers are attempting to awaken something like vision, which is wisdom in the reader. So similar to the senses, but on a larger scale. So just to spell it out even more clearly, how it relates to those planes, you got affirmation relating to the reader's the lower part of the emotional plane, so it's more self-concerned emotions. Appreciation relates to the reader's lower detached mind. Appropriation relates to the reader's heart and being, so it's the higher part of the emotional plane. And anagoge relates to the reader's higher mind and heart. And so you can see it a bit like possibly a spiral dynamic, but that would require a bit of explaining. Suffice it to say that each stage has its purpose, is relating to the reader in a certain way, either as a lower emotional being, a personal emotional being, or a critical observer, or a let's say a being, which is like a higher emotional plane. It's more than that. For the appropriation, it is. I like the word being because it implies something more than just your emotions or just your observations. It's like you've become someone, which is, I think, what the heart connotes, and that's what the senses are relating to. And then the anagoge, relating to mind or man as more of an awakened being, someone capable of actually seeing reality. So that is that additional column explained. Again, thank you for listening. This wasn't too much of a long one, and we'll see where it goes from here.